Hi all, welcome to the module on Antarctica and Arctic. The legal status of areas located beyond the national territories or state jurisdiction has always attracted the attention of legal scholars. This is especially true regarding the polar regions of the Earth, the Arctic and the Antarctica, that differ from each other in their geographical and physiological features. Antarctica is a continent surrounded by oceans, whereas the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by continent. Antarctica is the only place on Earth which does not have any indigenous human population, whereas on the other side, the Arctic has had an indigenous population for thousands of years and enjoys considerable political and military significance due to its proximity to the industrialized Western states. The protection and management of the polar regions are important because their slow physico-chemical changes have a major role in the evolutionary process of the planet. In this module, the readers will be introduced to the international framework for the protection of the Antarctic and Arctic region. The module aims to discuss the relevance of protection of the global commons in the changing context of technological and scientific advancement. The module will also discuss briefly the evolution of the legal framework of the above two categories and the major characteristics, scope, and concerns associated with its design and implementation of these legal principles. This module will also provide the learner with the basic knowledge of the environmental governance and management of these polar areas. The first part of the module, we will discuss the Antarctica. Antarctica is the southernmost continent of Earth. It has an area of 5.4 million square miles and is one of the smallest continents, making it the fifth largest continent on Earth. Antarctica is one of the remaining largest unspoiled wilderness. The region includes the continent, offshore islands, and Southern Ocean. Antarctica on average is the coldest, driest and windiest continent and has the highest average elevation of all the continents, which also makes it a desert. Trans-Antarctic mountains cut the continent into two, West Antarctica and East Antarctica. 98% of the area is covered by the Antarctic ice sheet, which runs to up to 1.6 km in depth. It holds 90% of the world's ice and 70% of its fresh water. The area is rich in gold, coal, iron ore, etc. and is one of the largest reserves in the world of these minerals. It is one of the world's largest biological reserve and holds a thriving ecosystem with many species. Fossilized remains of primitive organisms were also found in this area. Now, we would look into the need for regulations in Antarctica. The continent is very important economically due to the immense natural resources available in the area. However, this has also resulted in overexploitation of many of these resources. One of the main reasons for this is fishing. 20th century witnessed a high rate of illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, which resulted in overfishing of target species, mortality of non-target species and destruction of marine habitat. Second reason for regulations in Antarctica is tourism and scientific expeditions. The increased influx of tourists and researchers into the area is a major concern for the continent now. For example, in 2015-16, about 39,000 tourists visited the continent, which now indicates a 5% annual increase in visitors. Increasing traffic disturbs ecosystems and the combined impact results in pollution, including oil spill, introduction of alien species and other habitat disturbances. The next important factor to be considered is the presence of huge amount of ice and the influence it has over the ocean currents. West Antarctic Peninsula is considered as one of the fastest warming areas on the planet, and in the context of climate change issues, this also raises major concern. Now we will discuss the legal frameworks which protect the region. The effort started in the early 20th century, and one of the early efforts on making a legal framework for Antarctica started with the Escudero Proposal 1948, which was a counter to a draft USA proposal, that is the Draft Agreement on Antarctica. The USA proposal tried to rest the authority of Antarctica on certain southern hemisphere states along with France, USA, UK and Norway. Julio Escudero Guzman, a law professor from Chile, proposed a 5-year moratorium on the Antarctic sovereignty dispute to promote Antarctic science and demilitarization. This led to renewed international talks on managing Antarctic affairs, and at the end of the International Geophysical Year in 1958, the British came up with a proposal for an international commission of countries interested in Antarctica in conjunction with demilitarization. This led to the Antarctic Treaty 1959, which replaced all territorial claims with international cooperation and peace. The Antarctic Treaty system comprises of a complex system of international regulations for controlling and coordinating nation states' activities in the area. The system includes Antarctic Treaty 1959, Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty 1991, Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Seals 1972, Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources 1982, and Convention on the Regulation of Antarctic Mineral Resource Activities 1988. The Antarctic Treaty 1959 is regarded as one of the most successful multilateral agreements negotiated in the 20th century. It gives free access to all the nation states to the treaty area south of 60 degrees south latitude for peaceful purposes and scientific activity without affecting the rights of any state under international law with regard to the high seas. The treaty, concluded by 12 countries active in Antarctica during International Geophysical Year 1957-58, later on added 41 more states as parties to it. The treaty evolved into a sophisticated legal regime in which additional instruments have been adopted to protect and observe the Antarctic ecosystem and for managing the marine and non-living resources of the region. The treaty prohibits military activity except in support of science. It prohibits nuclear explosions and the disposal of nuclear waste. It holds all sovereignty and territorial claims in abeyance. It promotes international cooperation in scientific investigation and exchange of data. The treaty recognizes the role of the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. However, it do approve of peaceful settlement of disputes between the parties. The treaty has two types of parties, consultative and non-consultative parties. Article 1 of the treaty ensures that in the interest of all mankind that Antarctica shall continue forever to be used exclusively for peaceful purposes and shall not become the scene or object of international discord. Article 3 further urges the contracting parties to exchange scientific information and personnel to permit maximum economy and efficiency of operations. It also encourages free exchange of data and establishing cooperative working relations. Article 4 deals with territorial sovereignty, where it details positions of three categories of parties. The first category, those that had previously asserted rights or claims to territorial sovereignty, those that consider themselves as having a basis of claim, and those that do not recognize any other state's right or claim. The treaty provides that no acts or activities taking place while the present treaty is in force shall constitute a basis for asserting, supporting or denying a claim to territorial sovereignty in Antarctica or create any rights of sovereignty in Antarctica. It also denies any new claim or enlargement of an existing claim while the treaty is in force. The major institution under the Antarctic Treaty system is the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. This is the body responsible for giving effect to the principles of the treaty and the Environment Protocol and provides regulations and guidelines for the management of the treaty area. The body conducts annual meetings and experts are invited from Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition, International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators and other expert bodies. However, the decisions and resolutions are not generally binding, legally binding. Only those decisions which have been approved unanimously by all consultative parties become legally binding on the parties. And only the consultative parties are allowed to take part in the decision making. Other committees include Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, and the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs. Next, we will briefly discuss the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty 1991. This protocol designates Antarctica as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. It sets forth the basic principles applicable to human activities in Antarctica and prohibits all activities relating to Antarctic mineral resources except for scientific research. Until the year 2048, it can be only modified by an unanimous agreement of all consultative parties to the Antarctic Treaty system. The protocol has a Committee for Environmental Protection as an expert advisory body to provide advice and formulate recommendations to the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. The Committee for Environmental Protection meets every year to provide advice and formulate recommendations to the parties in connection with the implementation of this protocol. The protocol has 6 annexes which deals with first environment impact assessment, second fauna and flora, third waste disposal, fourth marine pollution, fifth protected areas, and sixth liability aspects. Another treaty under the ATS is a Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Seals 1972. It was concluded with the objective of protecting any or all of the following species. First, the southern elephant seal, leopard seal, Weddell seal, crab-eater seal, Ross seal, southern fur seals. The treaty provides that these 6 species of seals shall not be killed or captured within the treaty area by the parties, nationals or vessels. The treaty entered into force on March 11, 1978 and currently has 17 parties. The next treaty under the Antarctic Treaty System is the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources 1982. This treaty was concluded with the objective of the conservation of Antarctic marine living resources and its rational use, especially species like krill, finfish and other marine living resources. It takes an ecosystem approach to conservation. The treaty also established the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources for the achievement of its objective. The treaty entered into force on 7th April 1982 and currently has 24 members. When we look into the judicial decision which has an impact on Antarctic region, the Japan whaling case deserves a special mentioning here. In Australia versus Japan, or popularly known as the Japan whaling case decided by the International Court of Justice in 2014, Japan's activities of a large-scale program of whaling was questioned by Australia before the International Court of Justice. Japan defended its activity on the basis of special permits for whaling involved in scientific research. The court, however, concluded that Japan was not abiding by the terms it had agreed to. In March 2014, a majority of the International Court of Justice held that Japan's whaling program in the Antarctic, that is JARPA second phase, was not authorized under the International Whaling Convention and asked Japan to halt its whaling activity.